So we have this data set here, the lakes and ponds from the National Hydrological Data Set. We can use our Identify Features tool, click on Moosehead Lake, and see we have an area of 305.9327412 square kilometers. We'd like to have that in acres because, well, why not? So let's toggle the editing on this. So right-click, toggle editing. That allows us to make changes. I'm going to click off here so that's not highlighted. Now I'm going to right-click and open the attribute table. Here we are. And see we have this area in square kilometers. We can sort from smallest to largest and largest to smallest. And here's Moosehead Lake, of course, the biggest in the state. And there's our area. So this is just looking at the same data we just saw down here, but oriented the other way. Now we want to have acres. We've got our editing on. And we have to go to this tool here, Open Field Calculator. And we want to create a new field. We want to make sure we're not just updating any selected features. So we're creating a new field. We're going to call that Area Acres. Acres. And we are going to have to type in $, and then area. And then we have to understand that this area that we get returned here is going to be in square meters. We don't want square meters, we want acres. So we're going to have to make a conversion. That means looking up a conversion factor, which for this, to get from square meters to acres, we have to multiply by 0.000247105. That's from the Google, if you care to copy and paste. And we want this to be an output type of decimal number, so real numbers here. And there's a preview, so this is what it's going to end up looking like. So that's going to take the area in square meters of every one of these, and it's going to pop out the other end with an area in acres because we're multiplying by the conversion factor to get from square meters to acres. The reason why it goes in square meters is that is the area unit of the UTM coordinate system, which is what this is projected in. More on that to come. Okay. It's going to think about it for a while because, well, such things take time. There's an awful lot of features in this data set, and the computer is calculating the area of each one, multiplying that by a conversion factor, and then returning it to you. I have a very nice computer that goes very fast. Yours may take up to, I would guess, 5 or 10 minutes. Now, this has rearranged things because why not? But let's go ahead and sort by area in square meters again. Back and forth, back and forth. Here's Moosehead Lake, 75,597. So let's go ahead and find out if that's roughly correct. So here's the Google, and let's search for Moosehead Lake. Moosehead Lake, area 117.9 square miles. Max depth, surface elevation, etc., etc., etc. And let's go ahead and copy that number, copy, and search for square miles to acres. Type that in, and we are just about right on with that. So of course, these are different data sources. The area, depending how you measure it, is going to be a touch different, but 75,456 acres, 75,597 acres. So that's not a math error, that's just a where they drew the line type error. So there you go. We've calculated for every one of these its area in acres, which means now we can right-click, toggle editing, save our edits, and if we want to say look at one of these lakes, then we can go ahead and click on good old Chamberlain Lake and see that that has an area of 10,957.66 acres. Now you may have noticed that when I sorted by square kilometers here, I have this one's 172.762888091 square kilometers, but it's only 1.926 acres here. This is an important point. So let's go ahead and select that and then zoom to it. And here we see we're here on the coast of Maine, and we have a couple of parts here that this is in the National Hydrological Data Set as a lakes and ponds feature, but I clipped this data set to the shoreline, so I don't want anything that's overlapping with the ocean. And those two data sets weren't perfectly aligned. So I have a small part here where this part was sort of within the intertidal zone. So it had an area of 172 square kilometers, but then when I clipped that out or erased the part that was outside of the shoreline of the state of Maine, it turned into this little sliver of 1.926 acres. So that reflects the reality that this is not anything that changes with the geometry. This is a text attribute that just sits and is associated with this ID number. It doesn't have any knowledge of how big it actually is. It's just a number that was calculated once upon a time. When I clip that feature, the attribute stays with it. It does not recalculate. This is why I like to recalculate all of my areas after I do any kind of geoprocessing, because that attribute may no longer reflect reality. This one does. So this is the size of the clipped feature. This is the size of the pre-clipping feature. So watch out for that, especially when you're doing clips and erases and that kind of a thing. So here we have almost all of these data sets are going to be just fine, but anything right on the border, anything right on the shoreline, so if it's overlapping here, the National Hydrological Data Set actually includes some things that extend into Canada. So take that pond right there. So this one, I clipped it here, but the NHD actually tends to go a little bit over the edge here, so that we have information on those lakes and ponds and rivers and streams that go across the border. But because I clipped that, I only wanted this part of the data set. I have to recalculate the area now. Otherwise, here's another one. Here's Bow Lake. It's not a straight line here. Of course, there's the other half of this lake that is in Canada, but I've clipped it. So I'm not actually seeing the full area of the full lake. If I go and click here, that is more or less the correct area here. If I converted from square meters or square kilometers to acres, I would get a different number than if I just calculated the area in acres here using that conversion factor. So let's try that. Let's go ahead and access our data here. Let's say square kilometers to acres. And let's just go ahead and tap that number in here. So the area in square kilometers was 7.594, meaning the entire lake is about 1,876 acres, but the portion of it that is actually within the boundaries, within this area that I clipped to, is 909. So that's a sort of philosophical question to ask. Was it right of me to clip that in that way? I only wanted to see the lakes and ponds that were in the state, but there's lakes and ponds that form part of the boundary of the state. And is that right? It's the portion of the lake that is within the United States, but if we are considering how that lake actually acts, how it responds to inputs, its actual area matters. So there's a question for you to ponder on. Enjoy that.